Government of Canada follows, they have that obligation to step up and deal directly with the First Nations. They should not be sending their bureaucrats anymore to come and deal on bureaucratic matters, but deal on government-to-government basis. And certainly as a chief of my community, I support every other treaty band in Saskatchewan, Treaty 6, to come to the table and support this cause.
On behalf of Thunderchild First Nation, we've had our General Assembly meetings with our elders and our youth, and unanimous support in regards to not signing our funding agreement. I want to thank my council for being here. I also want to thank the chiefs from Treaty 4 who are sitting with us, as well as the reps and the chiefs from Alberta who are here. We can't continue to agree to administer poverty within our communities. We hear of the great announcements by the Premier, Brad Wall. And how are we to benefit? How are we to support, the bounty that he keeps talking about here in Saskatchewan, if we're going to continue to be subjected to arrangements that impoverish our people? We are forced and told by INAC through Anna Fontaine, the RDG, that they're going to put a call out, a tender, to get a third party to come and run Thunderchild. Well, when we did our audit and submitted it and presented it to our people, it was an unqualified audit, and we turned our deficit situation into a positive. And yet, unilaterally, as they do with the contribution agreements that they develop without consultation and due diligence to First Nations leaders, they're just going to unilaterally impose a third party to a community, to a First Nation. For what? Where there's no money, they have no problem paying whatever contract amount is to a third party member. Whether it's $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, but yet they take issue to the salaries that chief and councils get, but they have no problem paying that out. They have no problem with the underfunding in housing and so on and so forth, but yet they have no problem, according to legislation, to unilaterally put a third party in. We don't need third party in our communities. What we need is that bilateral process where we're sitting across face to face in good faith to come up with what's going to work. We're tired of being poor. We have resources within our communities that are controlled by government. We develop our monies in oil, gas, land, and so on and so forth that go to our trust funds, both the capital and revenue. We have to go big, hat in hand, for our money. And they decide when they're going to release it to us. That's why we cannot agree in Thunderchild First Nation to sign the 14-15 agreement. Because basically what we're agreeing to poverty. We're agreeing to something where the government, where the minister has enhanced powers, but yet is indemnified of any wrongdoing to our communities. Well, that's not how accountability and responsibility work. And yet the Conservative Party, Conservative government, ran big on accountability. Well, they should be accountable to us as well. We're people, and we matter.
The other thing, when we met with Minister Valcourt, Chief Wapas reminded me of the transparency and accountability on the legislation that have imposed on First Nations people. I called on Minister Valcourt at the meeting in Edmonton last fall. What's the difference between your government and our? The series of exercises that Onion Lake undertakes with our general membership, we go line by line by line on all departments, including chief and council salaries and expenses in our nation. And any budget that is required from our nation, from the Capital Trust, has to be presented to our people and endorsed by our people through a vote and a motion at the floor of the general meeting. I called Minister Valcour on that. When you get into Parliament, and when you're going to be addressing the budget for the next fiscal year on behalf of Canada and parliamentarians, I said, Mr. Valcour, do you go back to your constituency and do you ask all your constituents, this is the budget that we are going to be presenting, what are your thoughts? Do you consult with your constituents? No, you don't. We do that. Well, now which government is transparent, which government is accountable? We are. And to impose this kind of legislation, we are not going to put up with this. We are a sovereign people, and we have never relinquished that sovereignty. The infamous Indian Act created all of this distrust and this chaos and confusion at the time of treaty. Nobody explained to our people that there was an Indian Act that was developed in Ottawa that was going to erode and eradicate every single treaty that was entered in with the Crown.
Chief Jackson, Saddle Lake.
Good morning. Just make places with Chief Samatters. Thank you. First of all, I want to say good morning to all of you. I'm thankful that, we've come together to discuss and create some uncertainty for the federal government in terms of addressing the issue at hand. Saddle Lake is no stranger to what is happening here today. We've gone through this experience back in 1999, 2000. There are so many questions wrapped around these agreements that are imposed unilaterally. There is no involvement of First Nations to the creation and design of the implementation of these agreements. There are many issues that we identified within this agreement, and currently we are in the process of continuing our negotiation on the from last year's agreement. When I hear about our First Nation brothers who are having a difficult time in terms of addressing these agreements, my heart goes out to them. And I want to do what I can to support anyone who has troubles trying to move this mountain forward. On the one hand, the federal government dictates to us that there's no other way around this issue. There's a lot of distrust between us and the federal bureaucracy and the government it serves. Currently, I'm fully aware of 1, 2, maybe 3 First Nations that are not going to enter into their agreements. Kudos to them. Because on the one hand, the federal government can't even tell you, or the bureaucracy itself, whether or not these instruments that we enter into are legally binding or are they just administrative. When Bill C-38 and 45 were passed, many of us had issues and concerns wrapped around the agreements that reflect the Canadian law. Yet Saddle Lake received a letter from the PMO's office informing Saddle Lake that Bill C-38 and 45